Hey up. Time for another zombie film, I think. It's been a little while, hasn't it? Zombie Creeping Flesh, otherwise known as Hell of the Living Dead, or Virus, is a 1980 Italian zombie horror film, directed by Bruno Mattei, going under the name Vincent Dawn in this one. You might recognise Bruno Mattei, because he directed the film Rats, which we covered in episode 15, and I quite enjoyed this one. And it's also written by another name you probably recognise, Claudio Fagrasso. He is probably the most famous for directing the absolutely awful Troll 2, but you might also recognise him for directing Zombie Flesh Eaters 3, which we covered in episode 30. So, how does this stack up compared to all the other Italian zombie films we've seen so far? Let's have a look, shall we?
Over.
Hey, Santoro, look at that one. He looks like you trying to shit a brick.
Boy, with all them teeth, I sure like to have the dental concession here.
The film starts with a zombie outbreak happening at a research facility. We then cut to a hostage situation, which has very little bearing on the plot and goes on for far too long. Then we're with the military and they're out in the jungle. They stumble upon two reporters in need and they team up. They fight their way through a zombie tribe and make their way to the research facility, where they fight even more zombies and eventually die. Quite a typical plot for this sort of film, but it really struggles with its pacing, and it has some extremely dull moments. These are kinda made up for though, by some very entertaining zombie fights. The acting and dubbing, as you've probably guessed, are awful. Nobody really stood out as being the worst, but everybody's just written and acted terribly. On the plus side though, we get a lot of gore in this film, people getting ripped open and heads exploding. This might actually be one of the bloodiest films in the whole collection. But the quality of the effects, now that varies. It goes from sort of decent to absolutely terrible. The camera work can be quite nice, and I like the sets in this as well. I like that they're shot on location. But this film has got a real problem of using far too much stock footage. Now there are two types of stock footage that it uses the most. There's shots of animals and tribal stuff. Now the latter is probably the most interesting. And we even get footage of an actual tribal death ceremony, which is really grotesque to watch.
It's all over now. Yes. Don't worry, it's all over.
This is another sleazy one though, and there's a lot that I'm not going to be able to show you just because of the amount of nudity that's in it. Now there's no sex in this as far as I can remember, just a hell of a lot of nudity. And one more thing that I think's worth mentioning. The soundtrack to this is done by Goblin, and I absolutely love their work. They've done some amazing soundtracks for films like Dario Argento's Suspiria and Dawn of the Dead. I think it might be the Argento cut that has the Goblin soundtrack in it. Either way, they've done some incredible soundtracks, and the music's great in this film as well. But the big problem is that the music was taken from other films. It wasn't written specifically for this film. It's all licensed, but to me it seems a little bit like cheating. print here is very much like the film, very middle of the road. You know, I've seen better, but I've also seen a hell of a lot worse. There's the odd flicker, and there's the odd audio glitch here and there, but outside of that, it's fine, it's fine. And on the disc, same old stuff that we usually get. We don't get the trailer for The Claw though at the beginning this time, and one more thing that I think is worth mentioning is that in the filmographies section, we got some typos. They spell Margie Newton's name wrong and Franco Garofalo's name wrong as well. The quality's kinda dipping in these last few. And the case is pretty standard this week. The synopsis is fine, except this last bit just reads a little weird. There are some big problems on this case though. Firstly, on the front they spelt the director's fake name wrong. Then, on the back, they spelt Margie Newton's name wrong in the same way as in the filmographies section, and they also spelt Franco's name wrong, but in a completely different way this time. What is this man's name? They're definitely leaning more into Dead of Night quality at this point. They must just be getting lazy as they get to the end. Overall then, this is a very middle of the road film. It suffered a lot from pacing issues, but the gore was entertaining and there's plenty of zombie action throughout. I'd say that it was better than the Flesh Eaters sequels, but nowhere near as good as something like The Zombie Dead. And I could only really recommend it to people who just need more Italian zombie films in their life. If you were looking for an upgrade, 88 Films have got you covered with a Blu-ray, but if you saw this one for cheap knocking about, you could do a hell of a lot worse. So, not the greatest this week. Let's hope that that changes next week, because we're going to be checking out Lamberto Bava's Demons 3, The Ogre. No relation to Shrek. It's my swamp donkey.